International borders will remain open to Indonesia despite mounting pressure to halt foot and mouth disease. The federal government introduced further biosecurity measures last week after viral fragments were detected in Melbourne and Adelaide food products. The opposition leader calling for a block on all arrivals despite a divide in opinion within the coalition party room.
I believe we should shut the border, but I think the Prime Minister needs to explain why that has not happened.
And National Leader David Littleproud joins us now. David, Dutton's calling for borders to be closed. Are you?
Oh, well, I'm predicating my decision, and so is Peter Dutton, on the science. We got a briefing last Thursday that said the trajectory of this in Indonesia is actually increasing, it's not decreasing, and that it in fact isn't under control in Indonesia at the moment. So we're simply asking the question, if we haven't hit that precipice in which a decision around stricter border controls has been hit, then at what trigger point that is. And I think that's important to be transparent, not just to industry and the Australian population, but also to Indonesia. They're a good trading partner, and trade is predicated on science. And if you are to make those sort of temporary measures, then you need to be able to articulate that with science.
So you're saying no closed borders yet?
Well, until we see the science, and that's all we're saying to the government, just share the science. But if you're not going to share the science, then obviously we're going to take the precautionary principle and say we think we've crossed that precipice. Of what Peter Dutton and I heard on Thursday was that I felt as though we'd crossed that precipice. But I want to give the government the opportunity to explain that. But if we haven't, then tell us when we do hit it so that we're prepared, and so too are Indonesia. But let's make sure that we've got our borders in check. We've got chaos at our borders at the moment. We made suggestions 3 weeks ago that they've now implemented, but they're still not in place. I mean, a plane load came back from Bali today and everyone was waved through. Now, that's frightening.
Well, 2 weeks ago you called for sanitation mats. They haven't arrived yet. As I understand it, David, they're not in Melbourne. As you said, you heard travellers coming back. Why wouldn't the government and the bureaucracy simply install those sanitation mats in Indonesia for people to use before they get on the plane?
Well, this is the thing, there's a range of measures, and I got a briefing 3 weeks ago, and within 20 minutes I was able to come to the determination that one of the biggest vulnerabilities was the fact that while we put in extra dogs at some of these airports, and they can't detect FMD on the bottom of a boot, and the only way to take away that vulnerability, to mitigate it, was to bring in these mats. We also think there's some really cool technology that we put in place that's in Australia Post that uses 3D X-ray scanners and artificial intelligence we created here in Australia. But we were putting them into airports here and in New Zealand, and we think we should pivot also into Indonesia. And we also think that no one should be allowed on a plane in Indonesia as a passenger with food stuff on them. And that would take the pressure off our biosecurity officers. We wouldn't have this chaos at our borders. New Zealand actually did it about 2 hours after the Nationals came out and said this on Friday. So it's a really practical idea. So we're not asking to change the world. We're actually practical ideas that could shift the risk profile away from us and save Australians. This is going to cost you just as much as JobKeeper, but it'll cost every Australian every time they go to the checkout. You think the cost of living's high now, wait until there's this incursion in Australia. Your meat goes up, your dairy product goes up, and we're just saying protect our clean green image, throw the kitchen sink at it. We've been constructive with all the ideas we put forward, but bring the science forward so that we don't have this vacuum of information and commentary, that everyone can make an informed decision.
Right, everyone's watching closely. David, thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me.